Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Martisiute. I'm a policy analyst here at the European Policy Centre, and I'm delighted to welcome you here in the room and those online to our latest EPC Talks Geopolitics edition, which on this occasion is organized in the scope of Northern Europe Platform. That's the newest EPC initiative that we launched this spring in 2025 with a view to amplify and draw attention to the challenges, threats, and opportunities that lie in the strategically important region of Europe in the Arctic, North Sea, Baltic region. And I'm absolutely thrilled and honored to be joined today by Dr. Tanja Joona. She's a docent in public international law and is working as a senior researcher at the Arctic Center of the University of Lapland. She's leading a research program of just green transition. She's also Fulbright Scholar at the Arctic Initiative Program and also Principal Investigator of Rebound, a consortium funded by the Strategic Research Council of Finland under the Just Transition Program. She's also the chair of the Arctic Working Group of the Baltic Sea Commission, and her primary interests lie in Arctic affairs. So a very warm welcome and thank you very much for coming here all the way from Finnish Lapland, and also very welcome to your husband and daughter. Such a pleasure to have you here, and thank you very much for your time and effort, much, much appreciated. So today we will talk about two principal challenges in the Arctic, which is defense security, but also climate infrastructure development. And throughout this discussion, we'll talk about, many different aspects related to that, like research or economic development. Now, a very small housekeeping rule. The last 10-15 minutes of this conversation will be aimed for you. That is for you to make comments or ask questions online and in person for our speaker, and we very much look forward to your participation. Tanja, I'd like to start with defense and security topic while fully recognizing, of course, that climate change is a very acute threat in the Arctic. And up until recently, Arctic affairs, be they, military defense and security, be they resources or even climate, have been, rather low key, low conflict, and Arctic states tend to keep these affairs to themselves and kind of decouple from broader international security affairs. But this has changed, and it is changing partly due to Russia's war in Ukraine, Russia's military buildup in the Arctic and increasing alliance with China, but also US keen interest in the Arctic, not least when it comes to Greenland, which, kind of points at geopolitical competition, but also underlying a potential conflict for resources, for trade routes, for territory. How does Arctic security landscape look today, and what are the risks for this, sparking into conflict? If you could highlight that as a local, thank you very much.
Is it on now? Yes. Okay. So thank you once again for inviting me. But I would like to also look a little bit back to the history, because in the Arctic, we think that, of course, the geopolitical interest has always existed in that region. Yeah, it has existed for centuries. There has been different shifts and different events that has taken place in the Arctic. And for example, the very settlement of the far north was once enabled by the access to the critical minerals, for example. And during the Second World War, Finland lost our left arm area to the Soviets, the so-called Petsamo area. So, and this was largely driven by the access to these valuable critical minerals in that area. So it has been a highly strategic space, and today, of course, very, very much so, and not only just militarily, but economically. environmentally and culturally. Of course, we have quite unique cultural landscape there as well. But of course, as you already mentioned, the accession of Finland and Sweden to NATO has changed this historic geopolitical shift quite considerably. And I think that also the accession has fundamentally changed also, or redrawn the map of the strategic map of the Northern Europe, and kind of recalibrated the power dynamics there in the Arctic, in the Baltic Sea area, and also at the Barents region. And it's not only about the NATO membership, but just 1 week ago, or last week, Finland actually took another significant step onwards when we withdraw from the Ottawa Treaty, banning these anti-personnel landmines. And our eastern border has been shut down, closed for 4 months now. So I don't think these are symbolic gestures. They really reflect real ongoing tensions in this area, and also they reflect serious national strategic planning, of course. Finland as a country, of course, we have relied our independent defense very strongly. But in today's security environment, we must be also realistic, especially in the Baltic Sea area and the Arctic Sea area. We face complex risks that no single country can manage alone. So I think in this respect, also the EU member states and our European partners must also strengthen their own defense and resilience in this respect. All this, you must understand, of course, also that all this requires quite a lot of, I would call them even sacrifices from the Finnish state, especially since our economic situation at the moment is not so in good shape, and we need to increase our defense expenses. And also our trade, international trade to the Eastern and Russia, it has been shut down for many years now already. So those challenges, for example, what the Eastern municipalities are facing at the moment, it's quite challenging for that region especially. So there is a lot of changes, a lot of significant changes happening in that region, not only in the Eastern Finland, but let's say above the Arctic Circle, when we of course have now also experienced the NATO presence through these international exercises, what they have been having there, for example.
There's so many good points raised there indeed, and thank you for highlighting this turning point that happened in the Nordic, indeed, with the accession of Finland and Sweden to NATO. I also very much like that you connected both the Arctic theatre with the Baltic theatre, and this is where it's a privilege that you are indeed coming from a country that is very much exposed to the front lines on the Baltic side, but also in the Arctic. And I just wondered, you know, Arctic is a vitally important region for Russia. It's priority number 2 in its 2023 Russian foreign policy concept after the so-called Neo Broad in Eastern Europe. And it has been reconstituting and building its military while continuing its war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, the US is currently assessing its defense posture in Eastern Europe, which probably means that it's almost a certainty that Europeans will have to plug in the gaps when it comes to possible, let's say, withdrawal of a certain number of US troops from Eastern Europe. But when it comes to the Arctic, Trump seems to have quite an interest there. And I just wondered, how are you balancing this, Baltic Sea region with the Arctic? And if I asked you a question whether the Arctic security, whether you would rely more on the EU or on the US moving forward, what would you say? Thank you.
I think that what I already said is that it is really good that we have this, for example, a well-prepared army and universal conscription and a large, well-trained reserve in our country. But in terms of population, of course, Finland is a very small country. So it is really important that we are now a member of the NATO, as well as, and we joined as well as Sweden. But of course, the situation that's happened since, and of course, the US interest towards the Arctic has also influenced our decision or how we think about in these regions. So it's really important that also in Finland, we are not only dependent on NATO, but we have still this independence of our own. We continue to have the forces of our own. But I would also recommend that also other European countries do the same thing, that because we are not going to know what's going to happen after the Ukraine war hopefully ends someday. So it's really important that also European countries are having their own strong defense and also collaboration at the European level.
And if I can just highlight that indeed Finland is very much self-reliant example to so many countries in EU and allies at NATO, and in fact a major contributor to Euro-Atlantic defense and security. I also wondered, do you think these geopolitical rivalries and this rather precarious defense security situation is sufficiently addressed at the EU level? We know we have EU Arctic policy of 2021. We also now have Readiness 2030, where Europeans are trying to build defense industrial technological base of their own. We have EU Preparedness Union strategy. And I just wondered, is the EU approach comprehensive and strategic enough also when it comes to these challenges for the Arctic region, or could it do even more? Thank you.
One thing I want to highlight is that in recent years, things have happened so fast, and that it has been quite challenging to keep on track that what kind of things are happening, and also the prediction of future is very difficult. So we don't know what's going to happen next week and next year. But in general, I think we should also remember why the European Union was established at first place. It was the purpose to secure peace and stability and the prosperity in Europe after the Second World War, when we had a long period of conflicts in the area. So its founding purpose was to both this economic integration, but also political cooperation. So I think that we should maintain these basic values of the European Union and try to still somehow even make them stronger nowadays, and to build a more coherent European Union. But when it comes to the Arctic policy of the EU, of course, it's a lot of things have happened since it was drafted. But I would still recommend that our nation states would also have their own strategies. For example, in Finland, we are facing a very unfortunate situation at the moment because we don't have any strategy for the Arctic region at the moment. So our current government is not so much interested in these areas at the moment, which is very surprising because other countries are. And our former Minister of Defense, Antti Kaikkonen, said that Lapland is not for sale. That was a clear message from the Finnish point of view, but it doesn't mean that there is a lot of interest now towards the Arctic regions. And it's not only about the security point of view, but also, as I mentioned earlier, these critical minerals, for example, it's very important to explore also and see the possibilities in there. But there is a lot of interest in towards the Arctic.
Arctic is increasingly on NATO's agenda as well, despite the fact that actually so far NATO's engagement has been quite modest in the Arctic. There was an huge exercise in 2018 to test the logistics and reinforcements by air and sea in case of a possible conflict, but hasn't been such a major exercise ever since. Now, is there shared, we talked about Finland, you referred a bit to Denmark, Norway, but is there shared, so to say, understanding or consensus among Arctic countries when it comes to, let's say, NATO's role? If NATO is deterrence defense, which is NATO's core business, so to say, if they indicated a desire to perhaps deploy more troops to reinforce deterrence and defense posture, or perhaps to deploy certain capabilities, knowing very well that Russians are very active in the Kola Peninsula. Chinese are also, joining forces with Russians for naval exercises. But I just wondered, how would it be received by Arctic countries? Would it be desirable? Would it be seen as escalatory rather? I know that Norway has a policy that, in peacetime, no permanent deployment of NATO's troops or nuclear assets. Just wondered, what's the state of play towards NATO's greater role in the Arctic? Thank you.
I think that things are moving to that direction, that there is more and more collaboration between the Nordic countries, especially I would say between Finland and Sweden, because we are of course neighboring countries. But there was actually a big exercise last year in February in the north, between the border region of Finland, Sweden, and Norway. 24,000 men were on that area during the winter time. And I think that was also kind of a test case of course, we Finnish people, or our troops are very much educated or educated to do special winter wartime exercises, so very much capable of doing that kind of exercise in very harsh conditions when the weather is very cold and there's lots of snow. So that exercise took place exactly in the coldest months of the year in that region. And of course, for those small municipalities in there, it was a big exercise. But it was also, in my understanding, the possibility to test the capability of the troops, the international troops coming from Europe and US, and also the test case for infrastructure. And the further north you go in Finland, the more bad condition our roads and infrastructure in general is. The distances are very long, and you can drive hundreds of kilometers basically without seeing any houses or anything like that. So I think it's very good that these kind of exercise take more and more place in the Arctic. And there are challenges, some challenges, I would say, with the local communities. For example, this area where this exercise took place, it's very central for reindeer herding. So also the troops had to negotiate and to do the exercise together with the communities. So there were also to avoid, let's say, negative impacts. But it's really important that, in my point of view, that these exercises also take place. They teach us as local people a lot, but I believe that they also teach for NATO how to act and how to work in these kind of conditions, which can be very harsh.
And also the fact that you actually need the local buy-in, right?
Exactly.
And their participation or their agreement or approval with respect to their environment and their traditions. And with this, I'd like to move now in the second part of the discussion, which is indeed more about climate and the civilian dimension of security, which is of paramount importance because you actually need both military and civilian dimension to deliver for all kinds of security challenges. And climate change is, I read that it's Arctic is warming 4 times faster than the global average. I mean, this must have profound environmental and human implications. And you just attended the EU Arctic Forum in Levi in Finland. I just wondered, what are your key takeaways from that forum? I think it's organized on an annual basis. What really caught your eye, or what would be the messages you would like to pass to our audiences here in Brussels? Thanks.
That is true that the Arctic is warming even 4 times faster than elsewhere in the world. And now it is the saying that what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. We also have the warming in the Arctic has very much global consequences. And there is also a saying that Putin is not our greatest threat in the future. The climate change still is. So it is kind of the systemic crisis that will reshape our economies in that area, but also our communities, but also the kind of security architecture of the whole system. And we are living in a kind of a polycrisis era where these all big issues are intertwined and interlinked. So we need to have a more strategic or let's say holistic view. How do we tackle these wicked problems? But yes, I think it was a really good event, the EU Arctic Forum that we had in the middle of Lapland, in the time of the midnight sun. So it was really a nice event, and we could clearly see that it is really important that the EU is also visible in the Arctic, in the north. And we still, many people and many communities believe that it's so far away, EU, something that doesn't really, affect us, or also that our decisions concerning us are made somewhere very far away. In Brussels, even Helsinki is very far away from the Arctic perspective. So it was really important that EU is visible in the Arctic, and in this special conference, it is really important also that there is this youth dialogue. Young people are also involved in the discussions, but also indigenous peoples and local communities are involved in the forum, which is a nice way to really co-produce also knowledge from the region.
I'm just curious, what was that the youth accentuated the most, perhaps during the event? Would it be climate and the need, more urgency towards climate? Was it more geopolitical rivalry, or even the war in Ukraine, perhaps, and its impact on the Arctic? I just wondered what most significantly came out from the Arctic youth in this event, if you could share. Thanks.
Yes, those issues that you mentioned are, of course, very important. But I think that somehow youth people also want to be in in the front line when these decisions are made about their future. So they should be more involved in the decision-making processes already from the beginning. And I think this is really important that especially in this EU Arctic Forum and this dialogue, we should think about the ways of doing it. Now we recognize the issue and the challenge, and the youth have very visibly brought this thing into the agenda. But I think now at the EU, we should go to the next level and think about how concretely we are going to do it. Instead of repeating this same message year after year, we should find more concrete solutions how to do it. And the same goes with the participation of local communities, indigenous communities, and so on. So we should go to the absolutely next level of these issues.
But isn't that where the challenge is as well? Because one thing that also strikes me about the Arctic is that, of course, we know that for energy transition, the EU is pushing for coal, oil, and gas to stay in the ground. But now cooperation with Russia is paused in the Arctic Council. Perhaps at the research level, there is at scientific level something going on, but I'm not entirely sure. I'd like to hear from you. US has altogether left the Paris Agreement. And China is also, questionable to what extent, they're motivated really by climate, and to what extent that could be a limit or not for tapping into the untapped resources. So I wondered, what is the way out? I mean, is it the renewables? Should we more focus on renewables? And what are the implications of the fact that, we can no longer cooperate with Russia on these issues, neither really with the US? So it is indeed adding even more pressure on the Europeans on this front. Just wondered what your thoughts are.
That is true, and that is as a whole, it is a wicked problem. After and besides already those wicked problems that exist, so it's another one. But I would still urge for joining our forces and doing much more collaboration within the EU and the European level. I think we have really good examples already. Like, we don't have to always invent the wheel again. We have a lot of, for example, research done on these issues in the Arctic and in the North. We have a lot of research networks. We have the University of the Arctic. We have Arctic 6 network. We have universities in the North. So there is a lot of information already and knowledge about these issues. We don't really have to invent things again. And I would also highlight that there is a very strong Nordic cooperation, like between the Nordic states, and somehow that has been a tricky thing in the research field, because a few years back our collaboration with the Russians stopped immediately. We cannot do research collaboration with the Russians anymore. That was a very challenging situation, and at that point we were recommended to do collaboration with our transatlantic collaborators, and now that is also quite challenging. But I would still urge, let's say, with the Canadians to find new ways to collaborate, and because it's really important that we have also comparative research done, because I know, for example, that in Canada there are similar issues that we are facing here in the European Arctic. So there is a lot of possibilities still existing, but I would also strengthen our collaboration at the European level. Yeah.
Thank you. I think one of the messages indeed, as geopolitical environment is changing and adapting, we need to adapt and change as well. And I just wondered from, Arctic indeed has a very huge potential for renewables. And one of your primary areas is also green transition, digital transition. How could renewables and innovation be even more part of the solution, whether we are talking about geothermal, wind, hydro energy? Could you perhaps share a few examples of what's working and not working so well?
In general, if we talk about the Finnish Arctic or Finnish Lapland, or let's say the Fennoscandian Arctic, it is considered that there is a 200 billion euro investment potential in green investments in that area, which means that there is a lot of wind power energy, solar energy, not so much, of course, in the winter time, because you know that our sun is not shining during the winter time, but there are some of those plans as well. Then we have, of course, 16 of those 22 critical minerals situated in the Finnish surface that the EU has classified as critical minerals. So there is a lot of things happening also besides the forestry, and then we have of course these military exercise areas which are quite large. Then we have hydropower and so on. And last year in the Rovaniemi area, we made a record of tourism, which is also a interesting thing related to climate change, because I believe that when the summers get even hotter here or warmer here in the Central Europe or Southern Europe, people will come to North, where our summers are much milder. The challenge in this Arctic area is especially in this land use and different land uses, because they are almost always in some kind of conflict, for example, with the traditional livelihoods practiced in the area. That is the thing that differs our region from other regions of Finland and other regions of Europe. We still have reindeer herding, which is considered the traditional livelihood, part of the Sami culture, practiced in that whole area, where this all other land uses are also taking place. The situation is very challenging. It requires a lot of understanding, a lot of information and knowledge from the companies coming to the area, but also it requires a lot of resources from the municipalities doing the licensing processes, and also a lot of resource from the general public and who are participating from the, for example, environmental impact assessment processes, and reindeer herders who are not, educated to do these kind of things. So it's a matter of, human resources as well.
Thank you, because I think we should always keep in mind that at the heart of the Arctic is, of course, the local populations and local communities for whom all of these things have to eventually work, taking into account their interests. As we look ahead, indeed, the security environment is quite challenging, in fact, deteriorating in many respects. And I just wondered, what's your outlook for the Arctic is, let's say, by 2030, perhaps by 2035, and what your hopes are? Thank you.
I think this similar question was made to me in another panel a few weeks back, and I remember that the other panelist answered something like that, that of course we would like that there would be still people living in the Arctic in 20 or 30 years from now on, but also that the region is livable, that you can actually live there, you can have your income from the area, whatever it is. Is it is new economics or traditional livelihoods or something that combines them? But I think that the future is pretty much in our own hands also. Like, we are active actors and in that region, and I think it's really important that people can decide about their own futures, because, as I said, there is a lot of this kind of discussion or wishes coming outside of the region, how we should live our lives in the Arctic, how should we do business, and how should we maintain the beautiful landscape and environment, and how should we take care of these climate challenges and so on. But as a conclusion, I would still say that even though we are living these very critical and changing times where there's a lot of things happening, positive and negative things, and there's a lot of also uncertainty about the future. I think we still should give the positiveness and believe in hope in that way, that we think that there is a possibility to affect on our own future and do things how we wish them to be. We used to have a president in the beginning, from the beginning of 80s until the mid 90s. He was called Mauno Koivisto, our president, and he used to say that unless we know for certain how things will turn out, let us assume that everything will go well. I think it was really well said, and it applies still today.
Thank you very much. Indeed, that's a message for peaceful, prosperous, livable Arctic. And that indeed a lot has to be done by ourselves. And if we individually, take that responsibility forward, then the cumulative effect is far greater than our individual parts. I'd like now to turn to the audience online. I know Jana is somewhere helping me see where there are questions, but also here in the room. If you have a question related to defense, security, geopolitics more broadly, green just transition, raise your hand and my colleagues will approach you with a microphone. Thanks.
Thank you very much. My name is Algirdas Razauskas. I work for the European Parliament and I help the delegation that's, well, in its remit is also Baltic, Arctic, EAA, and broader region, Barents Cooperation, which is deeply frozen now. So, okay, a little comment maybe. You said, great words by Mauno Koivisto, but I'm afraid that if things, now you have to assume that things can also get worse, no matter how bad they are currently. Very, great for Finland due to its neighbor that you were not, overindulging in peace dividend, and now you have a credible force. Of course, the question is whether it's ready to fight the war as you see now, with hundreds of thousands of drones and stuff like that. Probably not yet, and that's where probably getting Ukrainian experience or the army on our side is super important now. I would like to ask you to a bit to I see a bit of schizophrenia in the EU's approach towards Arctic, Arctic and maybe resources as well, because on one hand we want to be independent from China, Russia, or other regimes that are basically blackmailing us. At the same time we say no, don't touch the you have to preserve everything. Same goes for transport connections, that obviously north-south for defense reason is completely inadequate for any military emergency. However, again, you have grazing rights, you have this and that, and of course these rights of Sami people, I think, well, if you say it frankly, I mean, they wouldn't be possible anywhere else. It's in this kind of region. But also the system kind of depends on the resources to survive that, you know, and then the compromise is some kind of necessary. At the same time, like related question, where you see that this kind of external actors use I don't know, social media, other tools to create to amplify this let's say tension between the two opposing you know, interests. Thank you.
You can answer now. We could take a few more questions, perhaps.
Maybe I answer immediately, okay, so that I don't forget your quite long beginning there. But yes, I think you are correct, and I just try to keep the positive attitude, because there are young people present also here today, that we should not think about so pessimistic about the future, but I acknowledge that there, of course, that there are risks, and especially living 250 kilometers from the border, our eastern border, you know, it's not every day thinking, but it is there. We know when we hear our firefighters going up every day because we share the same the airport is also a military airport, so we hear it every day. So it's very much presents the situation. But when it comes to this very tricky situation in terms of land use, I think that you are also correct that we should also find ways to tackle with this another wicked problem. And there I also urge what I tried to say already in the beginning, that we should also ourselves be responsible of our own way of thinking and decisions, and kind of take the leadership role in that way. That I'm pretty sure that we already have models and ways to tackle with these issues and challenges in the Arctic and in the North when it comes to local communities and traditional livelihoods, for example. But at the moment, the issues are very sensitive also, but things are progressing quite fast. So I don't think we have any more time to wait so long. We have to go to the concrete level, and we have models to talk about these issues, and I would just like to raise one concrete issue, and that is the compensations. We rarely in Finnish Lapland talk about compensations, and that would be one concrete issue that we could start the genuine dialogue also.
Very much for sharing these local national perspectives. I think there are challenges across the board in different member states at different levels, but that's why it's useful to have discussions like that, indeed, to revisit and see what is possible and what the limits are. Would there be another? I see that question online. Yes, Jana, please. Why don't you read it out? Thank you.
Good afternoon. So we have a couple of questions from our online audience. First one is coming from Paul Taylor. Do you believe there will be an economic boom in the Arctic as the ice melts, with a busy northern shipping route allowing quicker goods transit from China to Europe and lots more hydrocarbons and minerals being exploited on and offshore, or is that an illusion? The second one is from Philip Amrod-Drotz. Would it be feasible to make efforts to revitalize the previously existing joint areas and fora for contacts concerning Arctic affairs, such as Arctic Council, Barents Arctic Council, Northern Dimension of the EU? And the third one is from Alison Hunter. what specific action would you recommend for EU policy to confront its current weak stance to Arctic policy, despite the current geopolitical context? Thank you.
So on the Northern Passage, on Arctic governance structures, and one single action for you too.
Yes, of course, it's really difficult to nowadays predict the future. But as I said, that there was a few years ago the plan to build the Arctic Railway all the way from Rovaniemi to the Arctic Ocean. And it didn't happen because mostly of the local resistance in that area. But that would have helped, of course, when the Arctic Ocean is melting because of the climate change. Of course, it would have enabled the ships to put their cargo on the trails and all the way through Finland. And there is, I don't know if it's still a plan, but there was just a plan to build a tunnel from Helsinki to Estonia, Tallinn, and that would have connected Finland to the European railroad network. And of course, it would have been a kind of a really important railroad from the security of supply point of view. But it didn't happen. And at that time, there was also big interest of the Chinese companies to invest in northern Finland. Nowadays, the Finnish state is more careful and more aware of things. So there is not that kind of plans at the moment in northern Finland, but of course it doesn't mean that there would not be interest towards these areas. And we have also, for example, mining companies which are foreign origin. They are not Finnish mining companies in the area. So there is a lot of international interest towards these areas. So why not Chinese as well? So as I explained, the current plan now is to build the railroad through Sweden all the way to the Norwegian coast, and that would be, let's say, easier route in many ways to Finland, but of course there might be similar challenges in Sweden, unfortunately, because it would go through the pasture lands of the reindeer herders. So I don't know if it's a good thing to put it on somebody else's backyard. And the other question was about?
It's about Arctic Council and also different regional governance structures. Could they be regenerated more? Also because Russia is no longer really party to them for that.
Yes, that is true. But I think that for example, the work of Arctic Council, it can continue and it has continued without Russia. But I'm more concerned about our national policies, and I would really recommend the Finnish state also to take some kind of urgent steps towards renewing and taking some kind of position with its Arctic policy that doesn't exist at the moment. And it's we have this Northern program established by our current government, but it's mainly including economic potential economic investments and not so much about security or anything like that. Of course, dual use and those kind of things, but not so much and on preserving the Arctic or Arctic collaboration in general. It's more like an investment plan for Finnish North.
The last question was if you could recommend one action or one thing to improve EU's Arctic policy, what would that be?
I think that it would be really important for the EU to continue its presence and visibility in the Arctic, to organize these kind of events that was organized a few weeks ago in Finnish Lapland. Because I think when you are visible in the region, people also get empowered by the fact that things are in their own hands, and they have also possibility to influence on decision making and bring their views also to this level, which seems very far away when we look at it from the Finnish Arctic, for example. So this kind of continuous dialogue, I don't know how it's going to happen, but I think there is already existing really good channels to do it, and in collaboration with the local people, and somehow also empowering, for example, the municipalities in the area, because there is a lack of resources as well. So if we want to implement and do the green transition, which is something we really need to do, we need to do it in collaboration with the people themselves.
From my side, I would think that the 2020 EU Arctic policy perhaps would also benefit from an uplift to better reflect the new geopolitical realities, actually, after Finnish-Swedish entrance to NATO, but also the war in Ukraine, and the current EU's policies, even the cohesion policies, actually shifting more and more towards defense and security and resilience. We are over time, so unless there is a burning question, I would like to end the event, and would like to thank you very much for your time here, for listeners and viewers in the room, as well as many people online. And thank you and your family for your time to come all the way from Finnish Lapland. Hope you enjoy Brussels. Thank you very much indeed to all of you for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Tanja.
Thank you.